Good afternoon, students and faculty at ASU, families and friends. Students, you will always remember the celebration of your achievements, not least because of the necessity to do so online. We should, of course, be grateful that we have this capability. We have learned to adjust in many ways to the crises that have befallen us, not least by sharing the ubiquitous humor found online today. I swear there will be some great jobs awaiting our amateur humorists as joke writers for late night comedy TV when this is all over. So before getting serious, a few examples of this online quarantine humor. Day 7 at home, and the dog is looking at me like, see, this is why I chew the furniture. Does anyone know if we can take showers yet, or should we just keep washing our hands? I never thought the comment, I wouldn't touch him with a 6-foot pole, would be national policy, but here we are. You think it's bad now? In 20 years, our country will be run by people homeschooled by day drinkers. And quarantine has, in fact, turned us into dogs. We roam the house looking for food. We're told no if we get too close to strangers, and we really get excited about car rides. So there's nothing like a little humor to ease our anxiety. Another is to have confidence in leaders who help us get through crises, which is what I will briefly discuss today, how we all can become leaders in times of crisis. Crisis can bring out the best in all of us. Dealing with COVID-19 has required leadership nationally, internationally, at the state and local levels of government. But it's also come to the fore in the context of non-government and medicine and science and manufacturing and other businesses, religious institutions, NGOs, academia, and even in small groups and neighborhoods. We all know there will be more crises and there will be a need for good leadership. So how can we prepare for that? How can we become leaders? Let me start by telling you my definition of a leader. Leader is the person you believe can get you where you want to go, can achieve your goals. What are the qualities? Well, let's look at some examples that tell us. You hear the phrase born leader, and it is true that some people have personal charisma, which helps them lead. But I rather think people can prepare to be good leaders, and that when preparation meets opportunity, success is the result. War leaders provide a good example. George Washington worked hard at inspiring by his character, his sacrifice, and his dignified bearing. FDR inspired an anxious nation through his fireside chats. Churchill through his defiant eloquence. Sometimes a leader's primary challenge is to get quarreling factions to pull together in one direction. This is what made Eisenhower the greatest military leader of World War II. On other occasions, consensus may be impossible, and the leader occupies a lonely position of decision maker without good options. Here, he must have the character to push ahead despite adversity and seeming failure. Abraham Lincoln was convinced he would not win re-election, and he seriously doubted the Civil War could be brought to a successful conclusion. His decisions under fire have more than stood the test of time. Because it's still playing out and too much imbued with politics, I only mentioned our current crisis to make a couple of general points. If we've learned anything, it is that leaders should approach difficult problems with a great deal of humility. Lincoln himself showed that it is possible to be both firm and yet humble. But some political leaders and even scientists, at least to me, have seemed too sure of things which later turned out not to be so certain. In fairness, it is hard in the midst of a crisis to see everything clearly, and yet decisions must be made. Military leaders know this as the fog of war. They don't have the luxury of waiting until everything is clear to make tough calls. But do it with a dose of humility. And be prepared to be flexible, to adapt to changing circumstances. One other lesson of the current pandemic is, of course, that preparation can blunt a crisis. And it certainly seems that almost every nation, every leader, hospital, lab, Everyone could have been better prepared. But before you're tempted to play Monday morning quarterback, ask yourself if you really would have had the foresight and the courage to make better decisions. Finally, this crisis also puts into stark relief the need to balance interests and to honestly apply appropriate cost-benefit analysis. Leadership decisions frequently involve choosing which bad result is least bad. Truman's decision to drop the atomic bomb is certainly an example. The balance here between the unknown risk of more exposure to the virus against the certain harmful economic results from continuing the quarantine is another example. At some point, public servants accountable to their constituents need to make this difficult call, and that requires leadership. Eisenhower's decision to launch D-Day on June 6, 1944, is an example of a leader willing to take the responsibility and the consequences of a tough decision. While I've discussed leadership examples from history, in the current crisis, we also have seen countless examples of inspiring leadership by regular citizens doing uncommon things. Think of the examples you've seen in the news or online of extraordinary sacrifice, for example, by healthcare professionals, of generous contributions of scarce supplies, of businesses inventing new equipment, of pharmaceutical companies working on tests and vaccines and treatments. Think of the way neighbors have led in helping others in a myriad of ways. These are people who hold no high office, but have exhibited leadership nonetheless. So, if a leader is someone who can get you where you want to go, what are the common qualities of these people wherever they are? Well, leaders inspire others to do great things. They can persuade through knowledge and rhetorical skills. They make tough decisions, often before it's clear what the right course of action is. They may have special skill in getting people to work together toward the common good. They probably have a track record of success. Even though leaders by definition have a high degree of self-confidence, good leaders must be humble enough to appreciate when they may be wrong, and they need to be willing to adapt to changing circumstances. Knowledge is power, so leaders must work at acquiring knowledge and use it to prepare for the unknown. Leaders must be able not only to make tough calls in the fog of war, but sometimes to choose between two or more potentially bad outcomes. They must know how to balance interests and values. This requires more than knowledge or even experience. It requires judgment and wisdom. Imagination is useful. Common sense is at least as valuable. And as noted in the beginning, deploying humor can also help, as Ronald Reagan demonstrated so frequently. Above all, a leader must have courage to speak up when others prefer to remain silent, and to decide when others defer. It's not necessary to be in a position of leadership to exhibit these traits. Indeed, any one of us can lead in situations that call for it. This is how we can be leaders in crisis, whether big or small. We will get through this crisis as all others. We can even learn from it. Lessons of leadership can be applied not just to pandemics or war, but to other challenges we will face in our future, but especially to you students who have so many years and opportunities ahead of you. Congratulations and God bless you.